In January 2010, Japan's government handed its most bankrupt corporation to a 78-year-old Buddhist monk who had never worked a single day in aviation. The airline owed $25 billion. It had just filed the largest corporate bankruptcy in Japanese history outside of the financial sector, and the man tasked with saving it refused to accept a salary. We know how the turnaround ended. What nobody can fully explain is how a monk with zero airline experience pulled off what every restructuring expert in Japan had already declared impossible. Japan Airlines wasn't some regional discount carrier. It was the flag of an entire nation. For decades, JAL represented Japanese excellence in the sky, the airline that introduced millions of international travelers to the country's precision and hospitality. But by 2009, that reputation was a corpse dressed in a suit. JAL was hemorrhaging $8 million a day. Its debt had ballooned to 2.32 trillion yen. The government had already injected billions in emergency loans, and nothing worked. Traditional turnaround consultants came, studied the numbers, and left shaking their heads. So the Japanese government did something that shocked the global business community. They called Kazuo Inamori, the billionaire founder of electronics giant Kyocera and telecom company KDDI, a man who had been ordained as a Zen Buddhist monk in 1997, who spent his mornings meditating in a monastery. And they asked him to save Japan's airline. But to understand why a monk could fix what MBAs could not, you first need to understand the disease that was actually killing JAL. JAL's problem was not fuel prices. It was not the global recession. Those were symptoms. The disease was a corporate culture so rotten that employees had a nickname for it. They called it Oyakata Hinomaru, which roughly translates to living under the protection of the national flag. Workers and executives treated JAL like a government bureau, not a competitive business. Accountability did not exist. Departments operated in fortified silos. Pilots never spoke to sales staff. Maintenance crews had no contact with route planners. Management could not tell you the profitability of a single flight, not in real time, not in a week, not even in a month. When regulators asked for specific route-level financial data, executives said it took months to compile those figures. JAL was flying massive Boeing 747s on domestic routes half empty because politicians in rural prefectures demanded air service to their districts. Routes existed for prestige and political favor, not profit. The airline had become a jobs program with wings, and nobody inside the building saw anything wrong with it. Then a monk walked through the front door, and he started asking questions that made everyone uncomfortable. When Inamori arrived at JAL headquarters in February 2010, his total knowledge of the airline industry could fit on a napkin. He did not know the difference between a wide-body and a narrow-body aircraft. He could not read a route map, but that ignorance became his most dangerous weapon. He sat in boardrooms and asked questions so basic, so embarrassingly simple, that veteran executives squirmed. How much does it cost to fly this plane from Tokyo to Osaka? Silence. How much profit did we make on yesterday's flights? Nobody knew. How do your employees understand whether they are doing a good job or a bad job? No answer. Inamori had built Kyocera from a small ceramics workshop into a global electronics empire using a principle he considered sacred. Every single person in an organization must understand the financial consequences of their daily actions. At JAL, he discovered an airline where the cabin crew had no idea how much fuel their aircraft burned per hour. Mechanics automatically ordered brand new replacement parts because no one tracked whether refurbishing old ones was cheaper. Pilots routinely taxied using all engines, unaware of the massive fuel savings that could be achieved through single-engine taxiing. The entire airline was flying blind in every sense except the literal one. But Inamori did not start with spreadsheets. He started with something the restructuring consultants never tried. He started with philosophy. Every evening for months, Inamori held what he called compass sessions, essentially drinking gatherings where he sat with small groups of employees across every level of the company: mechanics, baggage handlers, senior vice presidents. He poured sake, looked them in the eye, and talked about the purpose of work and the meaning of human life. Executives who had spent careers in mahogany offices were forced to sit on the floor of aircraft hangars with the people who cleaned lavatories. Some executives openly wept during these sessions, confronted for the first time with how disconnected they had become from the people who actually kept planes in the air. Inamori personally led more than 50 leadership seminars inside JAL, teaching a philosophy he had refined over 5 decades. The purpose of a company, he told them, is not to enrich shareholders or satisfy politicians. It is to ensure the material and intellectual growth of every single employee. Coming from most CEOs, that line would sound like a poster in a break room. Coming from an ordained monk who was working for free, it landed differently. But philosophy alone does not pay down $25 billion in debt. So Inamori brought something else with him, a management system so radical it would turn every flight attendant and mechanic into a business owner. And that system had a name nobody at JAL had ever heard before. He called it amoeba management. The concept was deceptively simple, but operationally revolutionary. Instead of running JAL as one massive bloated organization with a centralized budget that nobody understood, Inamori divided the entire airline into small independent units. Each unit, each amoeba, became its own profit center. A single flight from Tokyo to Sydney was no longer a line item buried in a quarterly report. That flight became a micro-business. The crew assigned to it could see in real time exactly how much revenue their specific departure generated, how much fuel it burned, what the landing fees cost, what the catering expenses were. For the first time in JAL's history, a flight attendant could look at a number and understand whether her flight made money or lost it. The behavioral shift was instantaneous and almost violent in its intensity. Pilots began calculating optimal taxi speeds to save fuel, realizing that even a few minutes of reduced engine power on the ground saved thousands of yen per flight. Cabin crew discovered that loading 200 unread newspapers onto a flight added weight that burned extra jet fuel, so they cut the newspaper orders. Maintenance teams started cleaning and refurbishing parts instead of automatically ordering replacements, because now they could see exactly how much each new part cost their unit's bottom line. Ground staff negotiated harder with catering suppliers because the savings showed up directly in their amoeba's profit statement. Every employee became obsessed with a number that had previously been invisible to them. But Inamori knew that cultural transformation without structural surgery was just meditation without medicine. The cuts were savage. Inamori eliminated approximately 16,000 jobs, roughly 1/3 of JAL's entire workforce. He retired the airline's signature fleet of Boeing 747 jumbo jets, an emotional gut punch for a carrier that had once been the world's largest 747 operator. He killed the aging MD-90 fleet and pivoted aggressively toward fuel-efficient twin-engine aircraft, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the 777. He slashed 45 unprofitable routes that had been maintained for decades purely because a politician somewhere demanded them. Pension obligations were restructured, cutting retirement benefits for thousands of former employees who protested in the streets outside JAL headquarters. The Japanese public was horrified. Unions called Inamori a butcher. Retired pilots who had given 30 years to JAL watched their pensions shrink overnight, but the math was merciless, and Inamori never flinched. By fiscal year 2011, barely 2 years after being declared dead by the global financial community, Japan Airlines posted an operating profit of 188 billion yen. Not just profitable, the most profitable airline on planet Earth. The aviation industry could not process what had happened. A bankrupt carrier run by an elderly monk with no airline experience had gone from total collapse to global profitability leader in 24 months. In September 2012, just 2 years and 8 months after filing for bankruptcy, JAL relisted on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. The IPO raised $8.5 billion, making it the second largest public offering in the world that year, behind only Facebook. Inamori stepped down as chairman shortly after. Mission complete, but the JAL turnaround, as staggering as the numbers were, only tells half the story. Because what Inamori actually changed inside JAL was not a balance sheet. It was something far more difficult to measure and far more controversial. Here is what most accounts of this story leave out. Inamori did not just restructure an airline, he attempted to rewire the psychological operating system of 40,000 human beings. The amoeba system and the compass drinking sessions were not management techniques, they were conversion tools. Inamori was applying a Zen Buddhist framework to corporate governance in a way that no major company had ever attempted at this scale. He told JAL employees that work itself was a form of spiritual practice, that polishing your skills at your job was no different from polishing your soul through meditation. He introduced a company philosophy manual that read less like a corporate handbook and more like a religious text. Employees were expected to memorize its principles. Morning meetings at JAL began to resemble something closer to group affirmations than operational briefings. Crews would recite the company's new purpose statement together before shifts. Some employees embraced it with an almost devotional intensity. Others quietly resented being told that loading luggage was a path to enlightenment. Critics inside Japan's business community accused Inamori of running a corporate cult. They pointed out that his philosophy conveniently demanded total loyalty, self-sacrifice, and suppression of individual complaints in service of the group, values that sound spiritual until you realize they also describe a workforce that will never unionize or push back. But the results were undeniable, and that is what made the criticism so difficult to sustain. JAL's on-time performance surged. Customer satisfaction scores climbed to the highest in the airline's history. Employee engagement metrics, which had been catastrophically low before Inamori's arrival, reversed completely. The amoeba units created a culture of micro-competition where teams compared their profitability numbers daily, pushing each other to find savings that no top-down directive could ever have identified. One maintenance team discovered that changing the type of cleaning solvent they used saved their unit 11 million yen per year. A catering department realized that redesigning meal tray layouts allowed them to fit one more row of trays per cart, reducing the number of carts loaded onto each flight and saving weight. These were not innovations that came from the executive suite. They bubbled up from the people doing the actual work, people who for the first time in their careers could see the direct financial impact of their creativity. The airline that had been called a government office was now operating with the intensity of a startup, and the architect of that transformation had collected exactly 0 yen for his trouble. Inamori returned to his monastery. JAL kept flying. By 2023, the airline posted revenues exceeding 1.4 trillion yen. It operates one of the youngest, most fuel-efficient fleets in Asia. The amoeba management system remains embedded in JAL's daily operations more than a decade after Inamori's departure. Business schools from Harvard to Keio now teach the JAL case as the most dramatic corporate turnaround of the 21st century. But there is one question that lingers over this entire story, one that neither the financial data nor the philosophy manuals can answer. Inamori proved that a monk could save an airline. He proved that culture eats strategy, that transparency creates accountability, that people will move mountains when they understand why the mountain matters. But he also proved that the same workforce, doing the same jobs on the same aircraft, could swing from catastrophic loss to record profits simply by changing how they thought about their work. And that raises a question the entire airline industry still has not reckoned with. If the difference between bankruptcy and the most profitable airline on Earth was never about the planes, was never about the routes, was never really about the money at all, then what exactly are airlines actually managing? And how many of them are failing right now for the same invisible reason JAL almost died? If that question is going to keep you up tonight, this video right here will make it worse.